Hey, this is Aaron Lee from Y&T, and you are watching CMS TV.
It's Reverend right here on the Classic Metal Show with Remission, featuring the late David Wiggin on lead vocal. And we got some guests in the studio, Chris. So why don't you introduce these fine gentlemen?
Well, as we mentioned in the first segment of the show, there's a brand new documentary that is getting ready to be out there. You can pre-order it now. I will put the link in all the chats and all that stuff. It is about the band Heretic, which I was just telling these guys that here in the Midwest, we really didn't hear much about Heretic, so I didn't know much about the history. But it's a crazy story, and we love that always. And certainly these guys, well, certainly Angelo here lived it, and Tanner here turned it into a movie to tell the story. So welcome to the show, Angelo Espino from the band, and the Tan Man himself, Tanner Poppitt. How are you, man?
Gentlemen, how's it going today?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for guys so much for having us and helping us promote the film of the Don't Turn Your Back, the story of Heretic. So we appreciate it.
Well, we're always glad to have metal brethren join us on the show, since Chris and I have been doing this a long time, and we're always willing to promote some of our fellow metalheads and anything that they do. And I really enjoyed the film there, Tanner, and as I was saying just before the break, had very reminiscent of the late Bob Nalbandian documentary type film, like you did for the Inside Metal. It was very similar in format and kind of the way it was laid out. And both Chris and I, we enjoyed the shit out of those documentaries. So that's the reason we both enjoyed this documentary, because it was very well done.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. Hopefully you enjoyed the story. And Bob was definitely a huge influence, as you can probably tell with the credits and whatnot. And I just really loved how he put his films together. So I had never made a film before, and I kind of, was kind of emulating Bob. I was channeling Bob through.
I could tell. I could tell very much so. I was like, wow, this format looks very, very familiar to me.
That's a good one to steal if you're going to steal one. That's a good place. But well, Tan Man, start with the kind of thoughts behind this, man. I mean, of all the bands that you could do a documentary on, why Heretic? Why, were you like a huge fan as a kid, or what got you into Heretic? I know you love Metal Church. I'm assuming that's it, but tell me.
Yeah. I mean, Metal Church is my all-time favorite band, so that has. With that, I kind of learned about Heretic and Reverend, and I actually discovered Reverend first. The song you played, Remission, and that particular album, World Won't Miss You, was a game changer, and same with Play God, which Angelo played on. And I was just a huge fan in high school, man. I was that weird kid where the iPod was relatively new, and I was still rocking the Walkman, and I was kind of that weird nerdy kid that would didn't want to conform to the norm, and Play God was like one of my go-to albums. So years down the line, because of being in the metal scene, we got to play a gig together about 10 or so years ago. But before that, we shared a lockout with Inger's Art, who Angelo was a part of at the time. And so we kind of just connected on that end. I was just a huge fan. I met them. They were really nice guys. And the whole conversation kind of sparked on a podcast episode off the air, of course, where we started, me and my co-host Shannon Fry were just bullshitting and talking about our favorite metal documentaries. And either me or him, at this point, it doesn't matter, one of us kind of made a comment of, why doesn't Heretic have a film or a documentary about him? And I said, let me go approach the guys and see if they'd be into it. So that's kind of how the whole essence started.
Right on. Now, Angelo, you were in the scene, and obviously you played in Reverend for a bunch of years, with David Wayne. before the reunion where you came back as a member of Heretic, as someone that was in that scene at that time, what do you remember about Heretic? Was Heretic like one of the bigger bands that was coming out? You know, there was a lot of those kind of bands that were coming out at that time. Was Heretic seen as, you know, right there with Metal Church and Bitch and, you know, those types of bands?
So at that particular time, LA had a huge music scene. So, and Heretic was a big part of that scene. You know, Heretic, Armored Saint. I wouldn't say so much the thrash side of things because, you know, Slayer was huge in the underground scene here at the time. So, but no, they just had a big drawing. You know, they had great management. They got a lot of the cool gigs. You know, Motorhead, Wendy O. Williams. You know, just a lot of the big shows that came through town. Heretic was able to get on. That got them a big following, and any Heretic gig you went to, whether it was at the Country Club or at the Whiskey, the Roxy, you name the club, it was packed. So they've always had a big following in the LA area.
Sure. Was that at the same time that you were doing, what were you doing then, Uncle Slam, or was that even before that?
Oh, that was that was long. That was long before that. I didn't get into Uncle Slam until probably, I'm going to say late 88, 89, right around there.
Okay.
On a very short amount of time before I joined Reverend. But it was just, like I said, it was a little bit before that time. But Bob Marquez, the guitar player at the time, and myself were like best high school friends. So we just we ran together. So I was at a lot of rehearsals, a lot of shows and stuff like that. So I was kind of like that, you know, part of that group.
Excellent. Well, Tanner, you know, getting back to the early part of, you know, the documentary and Heretic, one of the guys that I got to know a little bit through Bob Nalbandian is Bill Montoya. And, you know, you had a opportunity to interview him for this film, and really nice guy. That guy couldn't be nicer. Such a low key, easygoing, laid back. You know, that guy is just always just so friendly all the time. So when you approached him to be a part of your documentary, was he hesitant at all, or was he just like, yeah, I'd love to talk about that?
So at the time I approached him, he was really busy because he's always really busy. He's Bill Montoya, for gosh sake. So he was recording bands, didn't really have the time. And so when the film actually got finished and I was kind of promoting it a little bit before the premiere happened, Bill was actually like producing one of the shows, and he was like kind of bummed about, you know, not being able to be included in it. So we made it happen basically as the film was getting completed. So he was actually the last to be interviewed for the film, and I'm so gracious and so grateful to have him be a part of it, man. I'm really thankful. So that's kind of how that whole thing happened.
Sure. And it was such an 11th hour thing too, because when we actually had the premiere at we had a theater out here in Southern California. When we had the premiere, Bill wasn't in it. He wasn't in that actual part of the footage. So for Tanner to be able to get Bill, be able to edit him in and have it available for the Blu-ray when it got released was mind-numbingly amazing on that.
Perfect. Well, you know, the you know, the crossover between Heretic and Reverend and Metal Church and the, you know, the incestuous relationship that those entities had. You know, the name Kurt Vanderhoof came up a few times. Did you approach him to comment in this movie, or not approach him? Or if you did, what was his reaction or answer to it? Obviously, he's not in the movie. So did you approach him at all?
I did. I actually sent an email and I never heard a response back. That's about the long and short of it. So
Chris, get Kurt on the phone, will you?
Well, you think he answers my calls?
Well, he did our show, so goddamn, you should have his you should have his you know, name and number on speed dial over there.
Hey, I'm not gonna lie. I was not that aware that Tanner was doing this movie. I would have helped. I would have definitely tried to put the. You know, I certainly know people over at Rat Pack that could have got the message to him. So we could have, for part 2, I guess, you know, or for the deluxe version when you put that one out later. But
The director's cut.
yeah, there you go.
Director's cut.
So, but here's a bone of contention, though. I figured that part he might not want to talk about that whole era. Kind of, you know, it's kind of a little bit. I wouldn't say drama filled, but you know, they were just kind of swapping vocalists at the time. So I didn't know if he wanted to tell his side to it, but I did reach out for the record, and I just never heard anything back. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to dig into the story, but I'm going to try to keep it a little vague because people should definitely buy the DVD, but you got to tell some of the story to tell people why it's an important story to tell. And I'm going to be honest, as heavier metal went back in those days, I think Heretic was kind of the hair metal equivalent to the band London, where a lot of great people came through the band and then left and went somewhere else and found success. You know, very much like London had Nikki Sixx and Blackie Lawless and, you know, a slew of other people that did the same type of thing. What was it, and either of you can pick this one, what was it about Heretic where it just never seemed to all gel and stay gelled together to see the band rise? Because, and I'm going to be clear about that, if you go back and you listen to the EP and the first album, and you can say that's better than the first Metal Church album, I'm going to call you a liar. It was that good from the start. And yet, for some reason, that collection of guys just never could find the magic dust or whatever it was to keep it together. So what do you think it was?
I think for me, you know, kind of being, you know, on the outside looking in, you know, and being good friends with all the guys, there was a couple things. When they originally started doing shows with original vocalist Mike Towers, when he left the band, that was kind of it was a big shock. And they were kind of like, oh my God, we need somebody quick mode. Fortunately, Julian, who was a good friend and a great singer in another band at the time, happened to be available. So, you know, him jumping in, you know, getting a new crowd, building momentum again, getting to go into the recording studio, only to have him kind of fired because Mike Howe comes into the picture. So Mike Howe comes in, you know, they do the Breaking Point record, get a little momentum, go out on tour. And basically that was a big audition for Metal Church, you know, so Metal Church ripping him away, just all the momentum, it just seemed to like hit roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And I think after a while, it just, you know, Heretic got kind of lost in the shuffle because now they were looking for another member, you know, another vocalist this time. And I think that was the big thing. You know, there's just, you know, having these little roadblocks come up all the time.
Yeah, I think it was poor management, to be honest with you. In doing this film, I think it was definitely poor management. I think, again, this is just an outsider perspective here. But in doing the film, you kind of learn a lot about kind of what happened. And I'm going to be honest, you know, they had one of the biggest managers ever to be, you know, right out of the gate managing Heretic. And I just think with the combination of vocalists, and maybe somebody got tired and just moved on from them. And that, again, it's a kind of a touchy subject for me, but I think it was poor management, just my opinion.
Well, and the story about Mike Howe is, it would never happen today, you know, and I guess I never really thought about it this way, but in today's world, it would not be uncommon to grab an unknown and put him in a band, you know, if he had the chops. But back then, you know, the story that was told in the movie really highlighted the fact that management companies didn't want to work with somebody that hadn't proven it on some level somewhere. Very different now, but looking back at it, I mean, was Howe even like a guy that anybody knew, or was he a total unknown? I mean, amazing voice, but how does Mike Howe find his way to Heretic, I guess, is the real question, you know, if he was an unknown guy.
So Mike was part of a band called Snare that had moved to LA from the Midwest. And they did a lot of shows together, and they became good friends. You know, I mean, you know, I'd say they probably did a good handful, you know, 4, 5, 6 shows, could be more. But in the LA area. So, you know, them being kind of, you know, the new kids in town, you know, Heretic being the band that really had the draw, they seemed to click. And when they did shows together, they were usually pretty massive. So that's how Mike Howe came into the picture.
Well, when it comes to the essence of a band, aside from the name, when you have so many member changes, what makes a band? What is the essence of a band? Especially if you're changing singers, if you're changing guitarists, you're changing all kinds of members. At what point is it no longer a band and just an entity under the name Heretic?
And that's a great question.
That's why you're on the show. We ask great questions here.
Well, for me, I think Heretic has 2 key pieces from the early days, and that's the you know, original, or the founder, who was Brian, and the original vocalist, you know, who did the very first EP. And has done everything since then. You know, I mean, Mike Howe did 1 record with them. You know, Julian's, you know, on his 4th.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming back. You know, all 5 original members, even if it was 4 of the 5. I think Heritage, the songs, I don't know, just the way the band is, the way the musicians, the way the members perceive the band. You know, like I say, we all grew up in that same era, in that same, you know, genre. And I think that's kind of what makes Heretic, is it's not a bunch of outsiders. It's not, you know, like this guy from over here, that guy from over there. We all grew up in the same neighborhood. We've all known each other since we were in high school. So I think that's kind of what makes this band, you know, Heretic. That's what makes it Heretic.
It's a familiar collective.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Right on. Right on. Well, Angelo, I'm gonna throw this one to you. Obviously, after Howe comes David Wayne. It's almost like a swap, but I'll let people watch the movie to hear that, because that's an interesting story that I don't want to tell, because that's well worth the $15 or $20 or whatever it costs to buy the movie just to hear that crazy story. But talk a little bit about when David Wayne joins this entity, and he's obviously an established person, but then, like, what was Heretic? It was decided that it wasn't going to be Heretic anymore. You took the established name, you brought in the established guy. It almost made sense where you could probably continue, but instead then they changed the name, from what I understand from the movie, at David Wayne's request or desire or whatever. Was that difficult? Because again, so close to having something that you can break out with, but then you lose all the history.
That's one of the other, I guess you could say, momentum killers, you know, from back in that particular time period. But yes, yeah, I think had David Wayne joined Heretic, I don't think we would really be having a lot of these conversations. I definitely think Heretic would have gotten a lot farther. I get it. You know, his ego was a little bruised. You know, he got kicked out of his band, and it was going to look weird if like, well, I got kicked out of that band, so I'm going to join this band. No, I've always been the Reverend of the Metal Church, so we're going to change the name of the band. And like I say, doing that, I think just it killed everything that Heretic had ever done.
Do you think it really was just a sense of ego of, well, I can't join the band that they replaced me from?
Yeah, pretty much. Like I say, that was just a little bit before I had come into the picture.
Okay.
It actually came in during Reverend's second record. So I had kind of lost touch with the guys a little bit, because after the Heretic thing kind of split up, there was a lot of uncertainty in that time. So there was a lot of decisions that were made, that were total in-house. So I wasn't privy to a lot of the stuff until I joined years later, and get to hear these stories. In fact, I learned a lot of stuff from this documentary myself. But that's pretty much, like I say, it was never going to be, because the first two Reverend albums would have been Heretic records had the band never changed its name.
Well, also, David Wayne has mentioned several times in interviews, like during the MTV days of, I wasn't going to join Heretic because that would just be weird, so we had to change the name. He's said it in interviews, and for rights issues, I couldn't put those interviews in the film, but
Right.
He has said it on publicly why they had to change the name.
Well, from what I understand, at least, over the years of different interviews and different things that I've heard about David Wayne, he was quite a handful to deal with. I'll let you speak to that, if you will. Who could speak about David Wayne? Was this guy a handful to be around, or was he as friendly as people say that he was, or was he just eccentric, or what was his deal?
I know we heard one story about a handful in the documentary.
You know what? He was both. I can't, I really can't speak ill of the dead. I will say that my career would have never gotten near what it was if it hadn't been for David Wayne. Taking a chance on some dude that the guitar player grew up with. Like, I know this guy, he plays bass. So it could have been a number of people. Do you develop an ego at some particular point in your career when Jesus Christ, he was the vocalist of Metal Church. I was in awe when he would come into the room. I'm at, try not to be fanboy, but I'm like thinking, oh my God, that guy's so, he wasn't the easiest person to work with, but when you're creating music, sometimes heads butt. Sometimes people have different, points of view on how something should be sang or how a part should be played or whatever. So, but he was also fair, we pretty much had free reign to do what we wanted musically. We never had to ask permission for anything, He just liked he liked a tight ship. Let's just put it that way.
Right on. Well, with him coming into the band, and I'm curious more about Reverend, because Reverend had a fairly not long run either. What was it there? Did he come in with a expectation of just kind of, well, we're going to pick up right where Metal Church was, and we're now Metal Church? Did he have that sort of an expectation, or did he understand that even though he had played on some great Metal Church records, that it was basically a new band that was starting over?
No, I think had everybody played their cards right, I think Reverend could have been as big as Metal Church, maybe even bigger. David Wayne is definitely was definitely a well-known name. He's a legend now, but I think he was a legend back then. I don't know. I don't know. Tanner, what would you say?
I would say that the scene was changing, and it kind of hindered Reverend's chances to get to like the next level just from doing the doc again. You know, you really find out that the grunge scene was kind of coming in as Angelo was recording, Play God and doing the live record with Reverend. And I think that really hindered the chances of that band, because I think had they started in 1984 as Reverend and then made consistent records, I think they would have been as big as Metal Church. Because you got to remember, Metal Church started making records in like 84, 85.
Yeah, well, I noticed that during the timeline in the documentary, and you kind of made the point that I was going to hit on here, is it's too little too late.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened. But again, Angelo lived it, so he might have a different perspective than me. So yeah, no, I don't know what he was feeling.
I think you're right, and I think the writing was definitely on the wall. So what we're looking at 90, 91 now. Like Tanner said, the music scenes were starting to shift. We were doomed, and there was a lot of bad decisions made. Money was going in nefarious places. Let's just put it that way, and it really wasn't going in pocket. So, like I said, there was a lot of things that were going on at that particular time.
Well, that's something I want to touch on there, Angelo, since you lived during that era. Obviously, we're 30 plus years since that time, and there was discussion in the documentary about people not being happy with the record label and all this other stuff. Bands today, they don't have that luxury or that ability to quote unquote be signed and have money put behind them for artist development and tour support and all this other stuff. Everybody is sort of self-financed these days because they're, record labels for the most part, they just don't exist. And there aren't any people who put that kind of money into developing a new artist or an act or whatever the case may be. 30 plus years later, looking back, when you were up and coming and trying to become successful yourself, did you have ideas of, man, if we get signed, we're going to make X amount of dollars and we're going to live like rock stars? Or was that a concern of yours? Or are you one of those pure artists that, man, I just love to play music?
Well, no, as a kid growing up, you're always gonna, own a jet and be a rock star and travel across the country. I think at that particular point in time, I think it was pretty clear. I think had money been used properly, there was definitely there was enough money for tour support. There was enough money for a lot of things that didn't happen. So. Like I say, it was just mismanagement of funds, mismanagement of the actual band itself, and it just that was just kind of it's kind of a sad story on how Reverend actually came to an end, because Dave Wayne ended up going on and recording several more records after that, and even did an album under the name Wayne, or maybe even two, but no one ever heard of him. No one ever, he never really did anything with him or his name because of poor decisions.
Sure.
And by that time, like say after Reverend, I was in a few local bands, and just I lost the desire, I lost the fire, the drive, and walked away from music for quite a few years.
But then you came back, and then it was almost like you came back into that old scene that was all coming back, because I know you were in Hyrax. I know you did some time with Bitch, I believe,
mm-hmm.
And then of course Anger is Art you did for a few years. Like you stepped in to like all of those guys. What was it about that whole scene that came back kind of all at that time?
So that amazing close circle of friends from back in the 80s, out of the blue. So we're talking 2003, maybe 2004. I mean, we're talking out of the blue. I get a phone call from Glenn Rogers,
Right.
part of the high school group of people that we used to run with. And just like I say, I hadn't heard from the guy in 20 years, 25 years. I get a phone call saying, hey, I recently joined this band. We're looking for a bass player. And I kind of laughed because I hadn't played a guitar in maybe 5 years. So I was like, you know what? I kind of stepped away from it. Thanks, but no thanks. And he was pretty persistent. And he said, look, just let me burn a DVD or a CD, and I'll send it to you. Just listen to the songs and let me know if you're interested. And it turned out to be Hyrax.
Okay.
And that was kind of like my, like getting my feet back into things. And it's been different, definitely a lot different, because like today it's a lot of do it yourself. And like, talking about earlier, having the record company, and doing this and doing that and stuff like that. Now it was definitely a lot different. I thought it was a lot more fun, and then I think as you get older, you realize that the fact that you're still able to play, you're still able to do the thing that you loved as a kid, just it makes it all that much cooler.
Sure. Do you think, as someone that was in that scene, Angelo, do you think that, and I'm just going to call it the Metal Massacre era, just for lack of a better term, but do you think that era and those bands are picking up steam now that maybe wasn't there in the original time? I mean, certainly everybody that was a hardcore underground person had the Metal Massacre records, and
Absolutely.
we certainly knew those bands, but that was not a lot of people. That was not the Motley Crue fan base that there was 5 zillion of.
Sure.
It was a very small thing, but it does seem like now there's a lot more interest in it. And I know it's awful to look at the devil that is Spotify for anything, but you do see a lot of those records getting decent amount of plays that they didn't get even during the heyday. Do you think that maybe just the entire scene missed the boat and it's now being discovered that it's good music?
Different times. There was definitely a much smaller scene at the time. Like I say, when that big Seattle wave crashed on the beaches of metal, it was just like, whoa. It just pushed it away, but metal also has stuff like what you guys do right here. We didn't have podcasts back in the day. Everything was, like you say,
Sure.
You wrote a letter. It was a fanzine that got mailed out or something like that. So it was, like I say, a lot different times. I mean, look at, we're on your show talking about a band that whose inception was, almost 40 years ago. So,
Right.
Definitely, because of people like you, you're helping to get that underground stuff back out there. Having kids discover music that they never would have because of formats like this.
Yep.
Perfect.
And amazing people like to pick the most random bands to do documentaries on.
Well, I mean, I always felt that they deserved to be on like that level. I don't know why the shows they get out here, man. I just want them to be like on that higher level because they deserve it, but that amount of history and they're still not like looked on with like tremendous amount of respect, I think is a disservice to the band and the history of it. So hopefully this puts them in that camp of like people rediscovering the band and put them into the conversation, and that's what, again, going back to Bob, that's what he would do with his films. And I'd like to think that this is going to stand alone just like Bob's films. And hopefully people will rediscover Heretic and Reverend and just all the history of, Metal Massacre that isn't Metallica.
Right. Right on. Well, Tanner, where should people go? Give people a little bit of the rundown on buying the product and buying the DVDs. And, I know you've got a couple packages out there. Tell people where to go and what to buy. And there it is.
There you go. So you can go to poppittproductions.com. That's the website there, POPPITT productions.com. We are selling a buttload of these so far. So we have a couple copies left. I hope everybody gets a chance to check it out. You can go on. It will be streaming on Amazon. It just got licensed for that, but
Nice.
unfortunately, I have no idea when it's actually going to go live. So until then, the only way to see it is to get a physical copy, because I'm a physical media whore, and I had to have physical media. And then, I have other films on there as well. And I just hope people support it and like the film for what it is.
Well, as Angelo mentioned about what Chris and I do and what a lot of other people do with the podcasting and the live shows and so on and so forth. Now that you're into the whole video documentary there, Tanner, are you self-funded? Are you self-produced? Or do you have any kind of backers that help you with your production cost? Or
No,
you're just a passionate metalhead who likes to do video documentaries?
Yeah, I would consider. Well, would consider myself an artist, a musician, a filmmaker. I don't know. I just fly by the seat of my pants when it comes to these things. And there's no funding. I mean, who's going to fund me, right? At this moment, right? I'm kind of starting to build my name in a different art form that isn't music. So I think, eventually I will get there. But this costed me. What, gas money? Is that what it is, Angelo? Time and gas money. So basically, I just did it out of passion and to, again, for a great band that I hope people will enjoy. So
perfect. Look at you. You're one of us. That's why Chris allows you on the CMS radio network.
And just to let you guys know, I mean, and like I say, this has just fascinated me. I wish Tanner had actually logged the miles that he put on, the hours that he spent on the phone, the hours that he spent at the computer, the hours that he spent tracking people down to get some of these interviews, the editing. I mean, this is a one-man wrecking crew right here. And for those of you who do pick up the Blu-ray, or whether you wait for it to come out on Prime. All of that is that one-man wrecking crew right there, and he did a fantastic job, and I'm so honored to be a part of what he did.
Oh, well, thank you, Angelo. I appreciate it, man. Yeah, I'm glad my efforts are acknowledged, and like I said, I didn't live 40 years, through this, so I put in my time, I guess, for the little moment that I got to work with you guys. But yeah, you guys put in 40 years, man. That deserves a lot more credit than me editing and putting together a film. So
excellent.
All right, enough ass kissing, please. I mean, stop it.
all right, guys. Well, we appreciate you coming on the show and talking about the new documentary that's available. Is this for pre-sale or this is for sale?
This is for sale. Yeah,
okay.
People have been ordering it, and like I said, I have a few copies left, so they're going fast.
All right, perfect. So why don't you be one of those people and go pick up this new DVD, this new documentary. If you're into the metal documentaries, a la Bob Nalbandian, Inside Metal, you'll really enjoy this one as well, because it's done in very much the same format, very much in the same way. And rest in peace, Bob Nalbandian. Great friend to us, great friend of the show, and great friend to all the metalheads out there.
Yeah, and a legend here in the LA area.
Yep, absolutely.
Right on.
All right, guys. Well, again, I appreciate you taking a few minutes and being part of the show. And since we're talking about Heretic, they had a EP out, which kind of kicked off the whole thing. It's called Torture Knows No Boundary. And I thought I would play Whitechapel to take us out of this interview. So what do you think about that?
I love it. Thanks so much again for having us, and really appreciate it, man. Thanks so much.
All right, perfect. Well, here it is. This is the legendary Heretic with Whitechapel exclusively here
on your classic metal show.
Charlie Kendall's Metal Shop is now available on demand. Go to mixcloud.com/metal shop and you got us. The latest Metal Shop shows in their entirety, absolutely free. Metal Shop.